In other words, it remains as it was at the beginning of the present financial year. And I'll then take leave not to deal with those aspects of the presentation, which is pages 2 to 6 of the presentation. I'll skip those, but just leave them for record. Then I'll proceed to slide 7. And slide 7 really speaks to the recent court rulings which have had an impact on what we are presenting to you today. And primary amongst those court rulings is the Constitutional Court judgment in the Mhlophe matter. And in that judgment, two aspects continue to have a significant impact on both the operational and strategic imperatives of the institution. The first is that, as we all know, that by June this year, we need to obtain and record on the National Voters Roll all addresses of voters that were reasonably available as at the 17th December 2003. Now, the relevance of that date is that that is when the Parliament, rather when Section 16.3 of the Electoral Act was promulgated by the President. So that bill was passed in 2003 and eventually promulgated by the President on the 17th of December in 2003, which means the legal duty for the Commission only arose on that day. So although we are pursuing every address that is missing on the voters' roll, our legal duty is in relation to registration post the 17th of December 2003. But for completeness, we are not looking at the addresses for people as of that date. We are looking at the whole population of the voters' roll. And then secondly, the Commission must obtain and record all available addresses on the voters' roll for the relevant ward segments of the voters' roll for purposes of municipal by-elections. Now, there has been other recent court rulings which fortunately we're able to set aside have them set aside on appeal. Firstly, the Electoral Court on 23rd September 2016, it set aside the results of the municipal elections for the Namakwa District Council in the Northern Cape. We took a strong view that the Electoral Court had misdirected itself and applied the law incorrectly. We approached the Supreme Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court of Appeal agreed with the arguments that we proffered in the SCA, and our appeal was successful. Similarly, in Ward 69 of the Cape Metro, in Berg, and as well as Bergrivier and the Swartland municipality. Again, we felt that the Electoral Court had misdirected itself, and we appealed to that judgment, and we were successful on appeal. Now, the third leg is the dismissal by the Pretoria North Gauteng High Court in the matter between the Electoral Commission and the Upland Consortium, which was an attempt to set aside the lease of Riverside Office Park. The matter was dismissed, and the Commission has reached the decision that this dismissal by the High Court now concludes the rectification steps that were recommended by the Public Protector. Now, we have previously indicated to the Portfolio Committee that as part of the preparations for 2019, we will be submitting via the Minister of Home Affairs legislative amendments. That draft, the Commission is done, and the draft bill has been submitted to the minister, and is now, the minister will start the process for cabinet approval, and it will be submitted and tabled in Parliament for your consideration when you come back after the recess. But just to provide some key elements of the bill, presumably not for discussion, just to give members of the committee a glimpse of what will be before them. Firstly, the bill provides for the electronic registration of political parties. Currently, it's a very manual process, so we are providing for mechanisms for new party registration applicants to file their registration online, to remove the restrictions from registration by persons who are affected by mental health, let's put it this way, persons who have mental conditions and who have been declared so by the judicial forums. So those restrictions that we had before, we are removing to comply with international best practice as well as our UN obligations as a country. And then the internal party disputes, we are providing for jurisdiction for the Electoral Court to hear and determine any matter relating to the interpretation of the Constitution, concerning disputes about legitimate leadership within political parties. Then we are removing this, and this I'm sure will be a serious matter of discussion in the committee, the in-person requirement for registration. And we are also making an amendment to ensure registration of voters in the correct ward, rather than the current provision that you need to be correctly registered in your correct voting district. So the legal entity is always a ward, and we are making the requirement to be registered in the correct ward and not necessarily the VD. So in other words, you can register in any VD for as long as it's in the correct ward. And to limit the objections to the voters' roll, to clearly define a window period in the election timetable, because part of the problems, which is a weakness, is that even after the voters' roll has been certified, we still receive objections. So we are creating a period of objections in the timetable and saying that beyond that period provided for, the window provided for, no further objections will be entertained. Now, the other issue that is emerging in the environment is the draft party funding legislation. On the 15th of March, 14th rather, of March, we were before the ad hoc committee on party funding, and together with National Treasury, and in broad strokes, the ad hoc committee agreed that owing to financial constraints on the part of National Treasury, the bill must be implemented incrementally. In other words, not all provisions of the act, of the eventual act, will be implemented immediately. So between ourselves, state law advisors, and the Department of Home Affairs, we now need to look at those areas that, that will be immediately applicable, and those that will be applicable in subsequent financial years. But there are also other issues. The Commission has been steadfast and very unambiguous about the fact that they will not assume an unfunded mandate. That's one, and that this party funding mandate must not cannibalize, to use the language of our chairperson, the resources of the institution. In other words, don't take money to print ballot papers and fund the operation of party funding, because that will result in a poorly managed electoral process. This must not affect the thing, which is why we propose that we have a entity that reports to the Commission that manages party funding, rather than the existing electoral administration managing party funding. So in our view, there are many unknown factors in the first year of the implementation of this envisaged act, but we proposed, and as agreed with the ad hoc committee, a phased-in incremental approach, and that the fund will have its own separate CEO, who must be amongst the first persons appointed to the structure. We also have agreed that we'll appoint 2 senior managers, one for party funding management and the other for policy and regulatory affairs, just to get a core structure in place. And the areas that we think that we will be discussing with the role players, which could be implemented in the first year, include the represented political parties fund, which is money that comes from the fiscus that goes to political parties. That, I think, is an easy thing to do. Secondly, to set up the multi-party democracy fund, which it is hoped that corporate businesses, South African businesses, will make contributions to that fund, and for that fund then to be distributed to political parties on the same terms as the represented political parties fund. We also think that the annual reporting and disclosure by political parties is something that could be implemented immediately, and the beginning of research and policies and procedures, those could be implemented in the first year, and all other elements of the Act will then be implemented incrementally over the medium term. Now, in the environment, there are factors that, of course, influence and impact on our programs. Firstly, we know that we've seen rather a narrowing of the margin of victory between the majority and those and parties in the opposition, which means that is going to be increased contestation, and the need. With that comes the need to run an election which is impeccable and not subject to challenges from any quarter. We've seen that our environment is highly litigious, where parties tend to courts to resolve disputes that we have. Sometimes the Commission makes a call, and those calls that the Commission make are challenged in the courts. As I indicated previously, it is not necessarily a bad thing that if you don't see eye to eye with the Commission on a matter, and let's get judicial clarity. And where it's necessary, I think it's important that we obtain judicial clarity. However, we've also seen, such as the cases that I reported on, where very frivolous matters were taken to the Electoral Court, and the court itself made findings that were susceptible to be set aside on review, and so on. So, as in every situation, there are pros and cons. Then there are a number of coalitions in a number of municipalities which are a bit fragile, which have led in 2 instances to the dissolution of councils in Motu in late 2016, and then recently in Metsimaholo. We are experiencing some level of intra and inter-party conflict, especially towards the elections in 2016, and that was linked to the nominations inside the political parties. As we know, in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, there's been a number of both candidates and councillors who have died in a conflict that a commission of inquiry is trying to determine what its basis is. Now, the impact in our work is that we then have to do more than normal number of by-elections, because if a person dies and he's in office, they must be replaced so that that community that he or she represents can receive representation. Ongoing demarcation disputes, we know of the Vuwani situation. We know that there are disputes around certain provincial boundaries. These issues are raised just before an election, when there's a media hype and so on and so on. Those communities resort to protest and so on around major electoral events, be it registration weekends and election. And lastly, in the environment, Chair, is the issue of the highly constrained fiscal environment. I think all of us in the state are aware that our fiscal resources as a country are limited. So we have projects here that are planned for and accounted for in the APP, but which are not funded, and we will outline those a little later on. We are also, as referenced in the chairperson's opening remarks, undergoing an organizational renewal, which I propose to skip, except to say that we are looking at a new organogram which will hopefully make us more efficient and more focused as part of our preparation. This is important, Chair, the technology renewal, and because it's at the heart of our preparations for next year's elections. Firstly, we need to replace our hardware, and with the suite of hardware is the first and the most important thing is the servers. We run our network on about 122 servers, which have gone out of their maintenance period. So in other words, the manufacturer of those servers can no longer support us in terms of maintenance. So it's a risky situation to be in. So one of the first projects in our IT refresh program is the replacement of the servers, because the server is the driver for your IT environment. You cannot operate without servers that are supported, that are under maintenance, so that if one falls down, you are able to call on the service provider to come sort it out. And then the second element of the IT refresh are the PCs, personal computers, the printers, and so on. These are scheduled for replacement late in 2018, early 2019, but we'll do this in a phased approach. I mean, the computers that parties use at our ROC, at our results operation centers, and so on, the printers there and the like, those two need to be refreshed, because we don't want, when you're looking at how your party performs, and then the PC stops functions, it's going to raise certain questions in your mind, and certainly I don't want those questions. I want for you to be in a comfortable space during the thing. And then, Chair, the registration devices. The present zip machines have passed 10 years of and they've gone beyond their operational lifespan. And that's one. But two, Chair, the fleet of zip-zips that we currently have only records your ID number against a voting district. It doesn't record your address. After we register you with a zip-zip, we still have got to have a manual process to capture an address. And part of the problems that we have with the addresses is precisely that your registration is not linked to the capturing of your address at the same time. It's a manual process and so on. So there's a need, therefore, for the future to resolve the address problem, to also replace the zip-zip. And we have ran a tender. I think it was advertised in August last year, where we called for a new voter registration device, 38,000 units. We are in discussions with Treasury because we think that we don't have all the money to buy these devices in one fell swoop. So we are considering leasing options, but for that you need the approval of National Treasury. So those discussions are about to be finalized, and if they are, the second issue that we will then look at is the affordability in relation to our budget. So it is not a foregone conclusion at the moment that we will definitely procure. It is our desire, but we'll measure that desire against available resources, and certain decisions will then be made by the Commission. And then on the software side, we need to upgrade from Windows 7. Our operating system currently is Windows 7. We now need to go to Windows 10. Now, part of upgrading to Windows 10 is for improved security of the operating system. Because with older versions, they have security weaknesses. You now need to upgrade so that you can build an impeccable security system for your operating network. Now, we also need to change the voter registration business process to incorporate location-based technologies, precisely because of the imperative of an address. You need to have location-based technologies to help you resolve the address problem. And we need to strengthen the use of mobile and online technologies, because that's where the world is going. Chair, I think I'll skip slide 15, it's the performance environment, and just indicate the following, Chair, that the Commission in 2011 set out what we called Vision 2018. Now that Vision 2018 is coming to an end this year, together with the strat plan, the 5-year strat plan. So it is necessary, therefore, for the organization to have a new revisioning exercise, which is planned for later in the year. And based on that, we will recraft the strat plan as well as the annual performance plan for purposes of next financial year. But that work will happen in this year. And this coincides with the departure of some commissioners. With the new commissioners coming, they need to agree on a new vision that is going to drive their tenure. Now, to get now into the strat plan itself and the APP, Chair, there are 3 strategic goals that we maintain: strengthening governance, institutional excellence and professionalism, and enabling business processes at all levels. Secondly, preeminence in the area of managing elections and referenda, including cooperative relationship with political parties. And the last strategic goal is strengthening electoral democracy. Now, the strategic objectives under Goal 1 is exercising oversight to ensure effective implementation of the core mandate, strategic goals and objectives, and align those to budget. Secondly, efficient exercise of oversight by providing an assurance and risk management services. And lastly, to build institutional capacity to enable the Commission to deliver its mandate. Fourthly, to manage the financial resources, to protect the public image of the Commission as an accountable institution, and to provide a stable, secure, and scalable ICT environment that meets the functional needs of the Commission. Now, the indicators are as follows. Firstly, the number of Commission meetings held per annum, 11, and they are distributed as 333 and 2 in the fourth quarter. And then the number of quarterly reports which are submitted to National Treasury and to yourselves. Will do a report which is reviewed within 30 days and submitted accordingly. And then the number of quarterly internal audit progress reports prepared by the Chief Audit Executive and reviewed by the Audit Committee within 60 days of the start of the next quarter. Again, we've planned for 4 internal audit reports. And the quarterly review and update of the Electoral Commission's strategic risk register. It's important that we, on a quarterly basis, analyze our risk and mitigate them and ensure that the Executive Risk Management Committee reviews that strategic risk register. It reviews the mitigation measures and review the fact that we've accounted for all the risk that we may be confronting as an institution. Now, the number of staff, we are planned that 90% of our posts remain filled to be maximally capacitated. So we're looking at 930 filled posts. And in terms of staff developmental programs, we are targeting 372 with very minimal in the first quarter, because then is when you deal with your financial year reports and the like, is when you deal with your performance contracts and deciding on what program training interventions are needed. We are on slide 23. And then from the in the second, third, and fourth quarter, you escalate your training. And then the performance management contracts, we are planning for 100% for the whole 930 staff. And the unqualified audit report on an annual basis. Now, if we turn to IT, we've planned for 97% uptime. In other words, when our system may not be available, we want to maintain a 97% uptime, and we've presented that as hours per quarter. We've taken the available hours of available in a quarter and calculated 97% of that. So that's the distribution across the 4 quarters. Now, Chair, I've spoken a bit about refreshing our IT hardware. And we have indicated that we're going to do it in phases, phase 1, phase 2, and so on. The phase 2 and 3 will be completed in 2018-2019 financial year. And that, as I indicated, is the replacement of hardware, the servers and PCs, laptops, printers, and the like, and the migration from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So that's phase 2 and 3. The crucial issue is this. We factored this here because it's such a strategic matter for the realization of the 2019 election. In other words, the impeccable delivery of the elections in 2019. We are working on it. However, it has not been funded by Treasury. The work that we have done in this area and the work that we will do in this area, we are using monies from other projects. We've scaled down other projects to be able to do this work. It's an unfunded project at the moment. Now, if we go to strategic goal 2, I won't deal with the strategic objectives. They're there on record. I'll go to the indicators. The first one is the average number of days it takes us to do by-elections. And we say a by-election must be held within 90 days. And then the PR replacement, we say that it must be 35 days. And these are legally prescribed timelines. And then the number of calendar days in which election results of each election are announced within 7 days. And then the number of elections set aside by the courts. We say we don't want any by-election to be, or any election for that matter, to be set aside. We can't plan to have an election set aside. And then the number of registered voters, because we are, this year that we are going into from next week, it's a year of preparation, although the election won't be in the next financial year, but all the preparatory work for that election are going to happen in this year that we are presenting. So we are contemplating a further registration weekend. And with that, we've increased the target of the voters' roll, people on the voters' roll, to 27.6 million people. Currently, we are at 26 million. So we need to grow that by at least another 1.6 in the next general registration weekend. Now, the number of persons who didn't have addresses as at that date, we say, consistent with the court judgment, we are working at a 0 target by the end of the financial year. The number of voting stations to be contracted for registration weekends or the general registration weekends, general elections, is 23,000. And we need to ensure that we timely source electoral materials in accordance with an approved materials requirements plan, as well as a bill of material, and ensure that those items are delivered to the election, to the voting stations 100%. So these are your the materials requirements planning. You know, how many pens you're going to buy, how many forms you're going to buy, and what allocations go to which voting station, that detail. And then the number of interactions with political parties at the PLC level, we are planning 1784, and they're distributed. Obviously, when you start at the beginning of the financial year, the interactions aren't as active. But then as your preparations for elections intensify, the number of meetings also increase. And the number of electoral staff trained for the registration weekend, 56,850. Now, if we go to the last program, the last strategic goal, the first one is voter turnout, so it's not applicable. It will be applicable in the next financial year. And then the number of civic and democracy education events held, we are looking at 45,000 sessions, broken down as 12, 18, 24, and giving us the total of 45,000. And then the audience reached by civic and democracy education programs through television and radio in each year covered by is 6.4, consisting of 2.4, which is TEMS, is the television audience measuring system, and then 4 million through radio. These are the people that we are targeting to reach on radio and TV on electoral democracy. And then public perceptions of the commission, with 80% neutral or positive report using media coverage as a measure. And then the number of spoiled papers doesn't apply, and the number of interactions and license internationally per annum, it's 20, distributed as 5 per quarter. And then the number of research and thought leadership initiatives, we are planning for 4. Now, Chair, there's a budget for each program, which is here that is important for the committee. Is it here? Well, it's in a different thing. Okay. Put on
slideshow.
Is that the right one? Huh?
Which one is it? Can you come and do it? The first one. Where is it?
That's right. That's right at the bottom.
No. 9 minutes. Chair, sorry about that. Chair, the budgets are as follows. Program 1, we've budgeted 621 million. So program 1, that's the, oh, it's not clear. It's 621 million. So that program 1, Chair, deals with governance, the number of commission meetings, internal audit, risk management services. And then program 2, which is really your core program. It deals with the management of elections, logistics, the buying of ballot papers, warehousing, everything that you see in a voting station on election day, it's housed in here, including the electoral staff that is going to be working in the voting station. So in this program 2, Chair, it's 976 million. Program 3, which is your voter education, communication, as well as research, is housed in program 3, and the budget for program 3 is 301 million. All in all, Chair, the budget for the year is 1.8 billion, 1,898,813. So 1.8 billion, which is planned for 2018-2019 financial year. And most of this budget, as I've indicated, is going to the printing of ballot papers, the printing of preparation of logistics, your bill of material, staff training, the acquisition of the voter registration device, and so on and so on. So, and those are, most of those are housed in program 2, where there's a budget of 976 million. I think, Chair, that would conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mamabulo. I hand over to you, honorable members. Mr. Kekana, Honorable Mr. Kekana, then Mr. Hussein, then Mam Khalipe, then Mam Kenye.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by welcoming the report. Before I will ask many questions, I will just wanted to check with where I left with the IEC last year. The last meeting with you is when you were going to request a condonation to the Treasury. We have never found a feedback. If you don't mind, please, just to brief us what happened. And number 2, what is the main reason that makes the Gauteng High Court to dismiss your request for the reviewal of the lease between yourself and Upland? And number 3, I wanted to know, did you implement all the remedial actions recommended by the public protector? If so, please furnish us with the report. Give us a brief details on that one, and to know exactly what happened. And number 4 is about the small increase of expected turnout voter for next year elections. Why there is such small increase? Maybe if, yeah. Why do international engagements increase from 20 to 30 in the 2019 election year, and yet costs are reduced by 25%? Why do international engagement increase from 20 to 30 in the 2019 election year, and yet costs are reduced by 25%. So let me stop here, Chair. I'm still coming with other questions. I'm pausing now. Thank you.
Time permitting, of course, Honorable Kikana. We go, Mr. Honorable Hussein. Good morning to you.
Chair, thank you very much. My apologies for being delayed a bit. Chair, thank you very much to the IEC for the presentation. And I just have 4 short questions. The first one relates to the new legislation coming before us regarding the funding of political parties. If I understand the current representative political parties fund, am I correct if I say that currently businesses and individuals can contribute to that fund as it stands currently, in a central fund that can be shared amongst other political parties? And if that is correct, I know that the bill is proposing such a situation for businesses and for individuals to contribute to a central fund, but I know that that's already in existence. If my assessment is correct, how much of money was contributed to that fund since it was established for the allocation to political parties? I know that that fund is made up of money that you receive from government to share to the various political parties based on their proportional representation. There's the 90-10 formula. But there's also provision for companies to contribute to that fund currently, which is the central theme of the new bill that's being proposed. So the question I'm asking is that if that provision has already been there, that's been promoted in the new bill now, what is the experience of the South African public or businesses from making a contribution to a central fund? I think the openness and transparency is, of course, very welcome, and I think that all political parties will buy into that. But just to get an idea of how that will play itself out going forward once Parliament considers it. Chair, the ICT upgrade, the mention was that there was some other projects that you're going to scale down to fund the ICT upgrade. Just out of interest, what are those other projects that you've scaled down, just so that we understand what the impact will be on the IEC's operations? And then you set yourself a target for a 0 registered voter base without addresses. Are we realistically going to achieve that figure of making sure that every single voter has a registered address? Your response on the last occasion was it was unlikely that might happen, that you will still end up with voters, registered voters on the voters roll for whom you don't have addresses, but you've got a target set at 0. Excuse me. And then lastly, Chair, I raised this question on the last occasion the IEC was here, and I'm not sure that I got a straight answer, and if I did, I apologize for that. The funding that the IEC currently receives, is this funding going to be sufficient for you to be able to achieve the requirement of the Constitutional Court by June? And even if not by June, in the next 2 voter registration weekends that you plan, that funding of 1.8 billion, will that funding be enough for you to be able to achieve those 2 things in this financial year? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Hussein. Honorable Khalili, then Honorable Kenya.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation, IEC. Chair, the last time when IEC was here, and they didn't have ample time to talk about the political party funding, but it was on the presentation. And then when we tried to engage them, the former chair of this committee just blocked us. So thanks God now that we have you as an acting chair, and we can talk freely, because this is our duty as members of this committee to engage with any presentation that is presented in front of us. So the political funding presentation that you didn't speak about last time, you said 1 Well, there is a view from the DA, it was on black and white, that the DA wanted this, the whole thing to be taken to the Chiefs Forum. And we didn't engage on that one because I wanted more clarity regarding that matter. And then, then the CEO came to the ad hoc committee, and I attended that ad hoc committee chair of the political funding. And then I tried to get a clarity to say that how, in Home Affairs, we're told that this thing is not continuing because the DA has blocked it and it has to go to the Chiefs Forum. And I attended the Chiefs Forum, the matter was not in front of the Chiefs Forum. So can I get a clarity? There was no clarity that was provided. Understandable so that it was a different committee that I attended, but again, on the very same meeting that Home Affairs was receiving your presentation, I specifically came with 2 sections, section 10A. There were 2 sections, and then I read 2 of them in front of you to say which one, because it seems as if there's a confusion. And the chair of the commission said, no, it's the second one. Then I was happy because I was looking for that section 10 as my party. But again, when I went to the political funding ad hoc committee, there was a confusion again. So it means that, Chair, in short, there are 2 sections that are in front of us. And I don't know which one is the correct version of section 10A in political funding. I didn't want to engage the CEO there in the political funding because I saw that he was not prepared to engage. But the ad hoc committee was very sure that no, the one that was confirmed in this committee is a wrong one. So there are 2 sections in, of political funding, chair of commission. So we'd like to get a clarity, because I believe that today the political funding item will be tabled today in the House with that other aspect of section 10. And in your presentation today, CEO, you just said in passing to say that you have agreed with Treasurer in order to have this funding of this entity, which is very new. And then again, you came here to say we are looking for 30 million plus or minus 30 million, but in the other committee, you came with a different amount. But again, I know that we have agreed with Treasurer to say that Treasurer will afford only 20 million. So I'm saying we are one parliament. I even raised the in other committee that we are one parliament, but to get different information, it's going to confuse this parliament. So, and that one information is also shared by you as the IEC. It seems as if we find ourselves as members of parliament not knowing which document is legal now. So I need that clarity on the political funding. Right, I was hoping that, but maybe it's not for this meeting, to get a report on the registration that took place on the 10th and 11th of March. I think maybe we can get it from other time, but I was hoping that now you want this 1.8 billion because amongst of the things that you are mentioning is to say that you want to run smooth elections, printing of ballot paper. To me, it seems as if we are ready for national elections, which is very good. But so far, we have only one voter registration. And you are not told when is another one that is planned by the IEC. And above that, 10 March to 11 March was the first voter registration. And now, I was hoping that the IEC will constantly share with us to say that those who didn't make it on the voters registration of 10 and 11 March, now the IEC offices are open. Where is that information? Because we need that information. I'm sure that the elections next year, everyone, all political parties are talking about those elections. And even the ruling party, if it's true that they are planning to bring elections forward, it means that we don't have time. So that's why we need to get more clarity on your side as IEC. How do you plan to make sure that everyone get an opportunity to go and verify their addresses which is the court matter now, and those who didn't get an opportunity to go and register. What is the plan? I saw the CEO on media encouraging people. He was doing on behalf of IEC to say that 10 and 11 of March, people must go and check their addresses and so on. I don't think it's enough. I think we need a program from the IEC side to say, now until the second registration, which we don't know yet, is the portfolio committee. But in the meantime, those who can be able to go to IEC, they must go to register for next year elections. And I'm covered by Honorable Kekane to get the status of the Riverside, because now you just, on your presentation you mentioned, but now we don't know exactly what is the status quo. And then as well as the issue of Namakwa, it says that on your presentation, so you successfully appeal, but we would like to know the status of Namakwa, Cape Metro, Swartland Municipality, because the appeal was not on the Constitutional Court. So if you can get a clarity on that one as well. And then you mentioned under the heading environmental analysis, all right? So there are new developments now in Metsimaholo. So as you correctly mentioned that sometimes the coalition does not go accordingly from political parties. There are some new developments in Metsimaholo, and I don't know what is your plan, or are you putting an eye on that one? Because it seems as if not, there will be a rerun very soon, because it seems as if the thing is collapsing again. So I would like to hear from your side, what are you doing? So the 1.8 billion that you are mentioning here, it also involves the infrastructure. This is not the first time I'm raising this issue, the IEC. The temporal structures. I know that some answers that we got before, it says that you rely on presiding officers. But I think that there's much that you can do, because we got some surprised when we do and visit voting station, especially on the 10 and the 11 of March. There was a voting station in Ward 56 in Nanda. I was so shocked to learn that this is a voting station that people, they were doing the registration. Just a small room. Just small room. So it goes back to the issue and the concern that I raised before, to say that it seems as if on your part, you don't do the visibility study before the voter registration day or the election day. So that's why on the election day, we flood you with calls to say, this is a voting station that you are coming across with. And then you also get shocked as we are getting shocked. So I'm saying, because now elections are next year, I think you must take time as the commissioner, as the commission of IEC, to go and satisfy yourself, to say, comes voting day, so you'll be satisfied that, this infrastructure and this temporal voting station are very proper. And I have here, we are on Hansard, because I reported this matter here regarding the KZN issue. And then you are mentioning on your presentation that you are looking for a very matured staff as well. I agree. The IEC must be like that. But I don't get a feedback, Chair, to say I raise a very important matter in KZN, and that matter also affected a poor child who was hired by IEC on a voting day. So if, as a member of parliament, I didn't get that information to that there was a poor woman who was not paid for a longest time until the commission intervened, and definitely shows someone on the HR of IEC at a provincial level need to be disciplined, because I'm thinking whereby this person was sitting at home hoping that one day her money will come, maybe after prayers, because she's sitting at home hopeless, not knowing how is this matter is going to be resolved, until someone said to me, there is this matter, there is this poor child, unemployment is very high, and then IEC said, no, come, you will be our staff member on the voting day. After that, the person is not paid. And I raised the thing, I wrote to the commission to say, please investigate. But to date, I got the acknowledgement from your side to say, yes, we are investigating this matter fully, but I have not seen a report to say, okay, our investigation has taken place and we have taken some steps, because if a member of IEC at HR department have done something wrong, have not paid that poor child, something must be done. That person must be taken into action. Again, as well, the last time, I also gave you another report pertaining your staff matters. I'm not putting pressure to you, but I'm saying, as a member of parliament, when you raise something which needs to be attended to, and I even said last time, we all want IEC on a dignity. We all strive for that. But if things like that were exposed by the KZN and by Mpumalanga, and you find that the IEC is not anxious to deal with such matters, it's also a crisis. So I'm saying that I know it's not going to be very easy on your side to tackle some of the things. For instance, during the voter registration in Marikana, there was a word that was reported that people were up in arms. They said they don't want any registration to take place. I know it's beyond your control, but maybe just to get your plans, if another registration comes, because the fact of the matter is that people get affected. Someone wants to go and do a registration, and then the community is up in arms to say that there's no registration. I'm sure it needs to be attended, and I would like to hear the plans from the IEC to say that what are the plans, what are you doing to address such things. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Kenya.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for the presentation. On your strategic goal, 1, you talk about the providing and maintaining secure ICT environment that meets functional needs of a electoral commission. And also when you look on page 14, that talks to technology renewal, you said it's long overdue that the replacement and updating of IT systems are long overdue. Now, my question is, what drastic measures are there in place to ensure that the upgrades of ICT doesn't delay the 2019 elections? That is question number 1. And also on this IT, because there's a lot, maybe it's because of this long overdue. What are the implications of 450 million rand shortfall in ICT funding for upgrade and address harvesting? What are the implications of 450 million rand shortfall in the ICT funding for upgrade and address harvesting addresses? And then also, what is involved in different phases of ICT hardware? What is involved in different phases? My question again, noting on the legislative mandate, legislative and constitutional mandates that talks to promoting conducive conditions, free and fair elections, also sound and democratic electoral processes. What is worrying me there? I'm worried about the addresses. Because when we were visiting some of us in these VTs, there was a problem of addresses. It is worse in the informal settlements, because I'm coming from the rural province, Eastern Cape, where you'll find in one VT there are 2,000 plus voter in the voters' roll, but only 51 people have got addresses. I'm concerned because you know that the informal settlements, they grow each and every day, and most of them have got no addresses. Yes, I noticed that there is a registration form that is specific for that. But what I'm thinking of, what is your future plan? Because you know that sometimes there are problems that there's no limit for this. Now, this time around, we've got no limit for these informal settlements. Therefore, it's a problem when it comes to the registration, the address problem, and how going to treat that issue on those registration forms which were there. Also, I'm concerned about the the registration turnout that Honorable Shoppers that talk about, Mkalipi has talked about. I thought that myself, by now we will know the voter turnout, as we say that we don't know when is the second round. But we're concerned because it was very low in some of the places, maybe in some of our provinces, in some areas of our provinces. So I thought that today we'll be knowing what is happening, what is your estimation, and how do you see the voter turnout? And lastly, there's this mandate also that talks to voter education. To prevent this problem of so many spoiled papers, what provision have you got to see? Because, are you really taking seriously the outreach programs so as to see that people go and vote? Because some of our citizens, I don't know the importance of voting. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thanks, Raputi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tate Kolube, for the presentation. I didn't know that you are a reverend. I heard the chairperson saying that. Congratulations, if ever you are one. And I think probably you will also lead with integrity. I think it's what you said, Chair. Yeah, okay. You said that the chairperson's remarks of the IEC, he said that there are 3 commissioners that are going to be, the term is getting to an end. And I just wanted to check with you, and you also said that there is a possibility of one who's going to get an extension. Who is that one? Okay. And then I just wanted to check how many parties have registered to date. How many parties that, I just wanted to check how many parties who have registered with you to date. And I'm worried, my colleague have already alluded about the, when you look at slide 34, column 3.13, I don't think that it can be only through the radio and the television. Just look at slide 34, 3.13. I think it's not enough, seeing that the number of the spoiled paper that we are getting at the voters at the VD level. We are not doing enough, and I think that it should not be the parties who should do that. Also, with the number of the staff that you hired, why can't we do demonstration? Radio and television contact is not enough. So we need really, for one, I want to be taught how to vote properly, so that we must refrain from getting the spoiled papers. Slide 29. I think according to statistics, we are having about 57 million, a couple thousand population in South Africa. And the number of voters reflected on the voters' roll, according to the slide 29, is only 27,653,000. I'm just asking that if ever you could have really give us the age, male and females, because I'm of the view that, meaning that the half of the population of South Africa, they are not of the voting age. It is half, if you look at it. When I look at the population of South Africa, it says statistically it's about 57 million couple thousand. And you have people who have already registered on the voters' roll is 27.653 million. I'm really skeptical about the numbers. But if we can get it, like, to check the age, to check the male and the females, so that we can see that really, is South Africa so, is it a developing country with so many kids who are not part of the voting age? Okay. I think, no, with the zip machine, it is urgent. It's very, very urgent in that matter. So when are you going to be able to rectify, when are you going to source those zip machine the zip machine that are going to reflect even the addresses of the people? If I come to my voting station, they put my ID, I've got a smart card, and with my smart card, before I know that I'm going to get that sticker to show that I voted. With the smart card, what is going to happen? Because it was my pride to see that sticker on my ID document. So with the smart card, what is going to happen now? Thank you.
Honorable Chauke.
No, Chair, thank you very much, Chair. And my apology again, I've been going in and out, Chair. Yes, you know that I'm still a new member trying to find my foot. I'm not sure, Chair, if we have already received a detailed strategic plan from the IEC. I'm saying this, Chair, because the presentation, if this is what is final, then I think something needs to be done. One is that we expect to get a detail. That detail will deal with a number of things. Not your general quarterly reporting, but your detail will then have to deal with timelines within per program, areas that are going to be dealt with within a period of time. It becomes very critical, Chair. I'm just raising it because I don't know if you have received any document, because if I had to use this as a strategic annual performance plan for the IEC, I'll believe that you'll add more flesh. Your budget will have a breakdown of the budget, Chair, rather than how this one-pager is presented. The point I'm making is that if that has been submitted to the committee, then I'm okay, Chair. But it will be important because all these probing questions that members are asking, they're asking them on the basis of absence of information. You may maybe want to, I may want to add maybe from what the colleague Mento has just raised with regard to the issue of the Constitutional Court vis-a-vis the budget implication. And I think if we were to agree, maybe, Chair, that the issue of voter registration becomes a standard presentation in the committee, Chair. So that is not by the way that we'll have to. It's the year 2018-2019 is the year of elections. Our interaction with the IEC will be more around preparations for elections. So therefore, the points that colleagues have just asked now, the issue of a zip machine that needs to be procured or whatever, you need to have when, how, when. Clear timelines must be in place, right? So once you raise the issue of voter registration, we expected to probe further questions around this issue. You may want to elaborate with regard to the meeting of this order. From your previous experience now that we have just had the first voter registration, what has been the experience there? And moving forward, what were the issues that were found to be stumbling block, and how do you resolve those issues? And how those issues translate into a strategic plan, because it cannot be isolated outside the strategic plan. I'll take it that now that you're adopting a strategic plan of the department, of the IEC, in it, obviously, it will carry this number of these areas that have been identified. So for me, Chair, is that I always love detail. If the detail is not here, it means that we may at some point have to get per program. How many people are you going to employ? Which areas are you going to employ those people? what level are you going to be employing those people? So for me, I'm saying that if it's not submitted, it's something that we'll have to interact with us moving forward. It's just general for me, so that I'm able to find my foot as we engage. But for me, I think it's very, very important that the breakdown of the budget that we pass, it cannot just be at the level of the overall budget. You need to get a breakdown in the particular program again, have a breakdown of that budget, so that all of us are aware that if you have put aside in your first program 1, you have put aside 625 million, you'll definitely have to give us a breakdown, how you are breaking down this budget. Because when Parliament passes the budget, we don't just pass the overall budget, we deal with the detail. So I'm saying, therefore, if that detail you have been presented to the committee as we deal with the budget of the IEC, something else. But it's very important that when you do such exercise, the strategic plan will have to be clear timelines that must be put in place, so that in between that, the committee can then be able to hold you accountable. How do we make a follow-up on a particular follow-up that we want to do on a strategic objective that does not have a time plan, you know? So I'm saying that maybe these are some of the issues that we may want to get further details, but if they're submitted, Chair, I'm saying that my apologies.
Thanks. I think there are areas like the issue of funding for the aging machinery and computers, and in line with the preparation for elections next year, and then the a detailed elections program as Honorable Chauge has proposed. I think that one, I do not know what are the plans with the committee. That one perhaps needed another engagement because of its importance. That is, when are we going to do what, and then whether we are having enough resources, staffing, and all those types of things. I do not know, but it need not be responded to now in detail. But my take, Honorable Chauge, would be we need a presentation on preparedness for elections, say sometime before June, so that we know that we are playing safe. Because now this one is having everything, but I think the proposal, I'm just trying to refine the position that perhaps if we could look at that as well, but I do not know how you are going to respond. Thank you. Honorable Figlen, I did not see your hand. Okay.
Thank you very much, Acting Chairperson. The question that I'm going to ask is just a new question because I've seen my question have been asked. I'm interested on the 23,000 voting stations. Are those voting stations including the farms and the temporal voting stations? Now, if so, when you have a temporal voting station and the farms, there are people, especially the elderly people, who want to use the private room to go to the toilet, and some of the farmers don't allow them. Is there any negotiation that you're making, especially when you do the temporal structure for voting? Do you put some toilets for them to relieve themselves? Then another question that I want to ask, it's a question about the voting day. I know we always say 7 till 9 o'clock. Now we've got people working in the restaurant, some of them, they close at 11 o'clock. They start early hours. Now, is there any proposal that you can make that the voting day must be on holiday? It must be a holiday day. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think we are at a stage where we've got to manage time now much more stricter, because we're still going to have the GPW. Now it's going for for 2:15. Perhaps if the responses are for 15 minutes, and then we evaluate from there how we go forward, please. So up to 10:02.
Yes, thank you, Chair and honorable members. I think looking at the number of questions and the time that, again, we get allocated, it becomes problematic. With due respect to honorable members, I think it ends up probably defeating the purpose that we get the number of questions that we receive over the series of the meetings now that we've had actually, and those questions get answered. We come to the next meeting, they get asked again. The continuity, some members are there in the meeting, the questions are asked. In the next meeting, they're not there, but the questions were answered, they get asked again. So I don't know what mechanisms do we have to enable that there is continuity, whether members have been present or not on the part of the honorable members, whether the minutes of the previous meeting get cited prior to coming to the meeting so that we can be able to cut down the questions and deal with the new or the unclarified questions. So it's just an appeal, Chair, that I don't think we have an answer for now, but an observation that when one was looking and listening, going through the questions, is picking up some of that. And further also is that some of the questions...
Point of order, Chair. No, look, with the IEC is correct maybe that some of the questions are asked repeatedly by members of the committee. But what the IEC must not do, you must not lecture members how to ask you questions. That's one mistake that you must not do. I get your point, but what you must do at your level, not even to say members must refer to their minutes, don't do that mistake. What you must do is that identify questions that are new, that require an answer, and then deal with the very same questions that they've asked. They can ask them 20 times at some point. You are given time to respond to those questions. The reason that they are asked these questions is because someone wants to get information on that. So it cannot be that a question has been asked last time, therefore today we are not going to respond. But again, it will be the responsibility of those that are chairing the meeting to be able to guide and direct you on the issues that are raised by members. Because if you cross the line and you sort of begin to dictate to members how to ask questions, you're going to find yourself in a wrong situation at some point. So I'm saying that members who are there and the support staff that is there must be the aid to the chair of the committee so that it's able to guide members. They are not there just to sit and watch the chair, but they are there to guide the chair on repeated questions that have been asked. They are there to note and address it to the chair, rather than the IEC being the one that is doing that exercise.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chauke. Yes, but let us be mindful of the time.
Yes, Chair, I think that order was sustainable because even the chair of the commission is saying that at some point members were not available on the last minute. So how do you know what this question was asked on your absence? I think that order is very sustainable. You can't be told by the IEC as members of parliament what to ask and not what to ask. I was waiting for you, Chair, just to call him out of order because it's not his place. Thank you.
Okay, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and honorable members. I think this was a qualifying introduction, not to say one is here to try and specify and dictate to the committee. What I'm trying to indicate is the context in which now we are responding is that there is this particular challenge which I'm appealing to the chair and to the portfolio committee for us to work out what mechanism to deal with what one is observing, not to say these matters should not be raised or we have no obligation to answer them. Because when we now summarize some of the matters, it may also be as though we are being disrespectful to the members. I think for me, that's the context and the spirit in which I was bringing up those particular matters. And in qualifying in that one may not be able to just go with each one of those
Chair.
points.
Can you stop the chair of the IEC? Ntate Mashinini, we are the members of parliament. You are an official. You're coming here to report to us, and don't want to be arrogant and tell us how to ask questions. Please respect what the members have said to you, respectfully. So don't want us to come on your head. Please answer the question in front of you without saying many things. No matter you repeat or you do what, it doesn't matter. Do what we have done. I'm quite listening to the members calling you to order, but you still wanted to justify it. That is disrespectful. You should not ever again. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, I would like the Chair to reflect on this matter now, because I was making an appeal in my capacity as the chair of a Chapter 9 institution. I am answerable to Parliament, but I cannot also accept the manner I'm being treated.
Let us allow the CEO to respond, and then we'll address that issue over time.
No, thank you very much, members of parliament. The question, starting with the questions that were raised by Honorable Kekana. The condonation application was signed and sent to National Treasury, I think, on the 12th of January this year, following a meeting that we've had with the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, where we discussed the modalities and the detail that was required. So that submission was made on the 12th, and since subsequent to that, they've asked for more particulars, more details, which we've subsequently made available. Last week, the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer wrote to me to check whether we had reported the matter to the police for criminal investigation. We have responded to them to say the matter was indeed reported and investigated, and the investigation has been concluded. And the outcome of that investigation is that there's no criminal liability. So that information has been made available to the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. It is my expectation, therefore, that in a matter of days, we will get an indication whether the condonation has been granted or not. Now, I must indicate, members of parliament, that in our interaction with National Treasury, they indicated that they are not in a position, they will not be in a position to condone future expenditure. They can only condone previous expenditure. So which means for the 2-3 years left of the lease, there'll still be findings of irregular expenditure, and we will then have to request condonation on a year-by-year basis. So that's where we are on that matter of the Riverside Office Park and the application for condonation to National Treasury. Now, what is the main reason for the High Court application not being successful? The judgment of the High Court is that, and this is high level, they needed to treat the application in terms of the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act. And one of the principles of the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act is whether hearing an application of that sort is in the interest of justice. Now, in the view of the judge who had the application, was that the commission had prolonged, rather they had delayed coming to court. That's one. Two, in analyzing whether there's justification to set aside the lease, we needed to look at the impact that that decision would have on the lease and the cost to the state. Because the judge was saying, for instance, if you set aside this lease, it means the IEC must still go somewhere and procure another lease. So the state will be paying twice, as it were, in terms of the fittings, because there are fittings that were made. So you need to go fit out a new building, and the state will therefore be making a same payment twice for the same thing. You know, so that's one of the reasons. Thirdly, the judge pointed out that setting out the lease is going to create hardship on the part of the lessor, in that on the basis of the lease that was signed, they went to a bank and borrowed money, got a bond. Now, the bank made a decision on the basis of that lease to grant a bond. If you set aside that lease, the lessor has already made financial commitments, he's got commitments with the bank and so on, and he used that as part of the reasons for arriving at the decision that this would not be in the interest of justice. The judgment itself is very extensive, and I've just given you salient and high-level points. We can submit to that judgment to the Secretariat for circulation to members. If we need a detailed account, we can come back and give a summary of the judgment. Now, the remedial actions of the public protector included the following things. Firstly, that there has to be a forensic investigation instituted by National Treasury. The Commission must consider whether it is appropriate to take disciplinary action against the officials of the Commission who were involved, and whether they should not refer the matter for the lease to be set aside. So the Commission interacted with National Treasury, and PwC was appointed to do a forensic investigation. So that forensic investigation was done, and a report is available. That report was made available to the public protector. So that was done. And secondly, the disciplinary action was instituted against 3 officials: Mr. Mosotho Moepa, the erstwhile CEO, Mr. Lebese Mapanga, who is the Chief Information Officer, and Mr. Stephen Lentry, who was the manager in the office of the previous CEO, Ms. Tlakula. Now, Mr. Lentry resigned before the disciplinary action could be brought to a conclusion. Mr. Mosotho Moepya, contract expired at the end of March 2017. So he also left before the conclusion of the disciplinary processes. Mr. Lubisi Mapanga's disciplinary is still active but not concluded. He has made certain representations after there was a labor appeal court matter that was not finalized. So that is still active and not resolved. The Commission, at its February meeting, referred that matter to me to finalize with him, given all this unresolved litigation in the labor court. So as matters relate to disciplinary action, that's where we are. And then there was also a criminal investigation by the Hawks, which concluded in late 2016 that they have investigated everybody who was involved, and in their view, criminal liability has not arisen, and therefore there's no reasonable prospects of successful prosecution. I think in terms of and that's the basis why we were saying that the remedial action recommended by the Public Protector has now been implemented and concluded. But the fact that the disciplinary action against the Chief Information Officer is still in action. Now, voter turnout, we achieved a 73.48% in 2014. We obviously have to grow a voter turnout. We can't want to go down. So we believe it is reasonable and realistic that we can have a 75% turnout for the next elections in 2014. Obviously, there's a difference between difference in the level of participation for national and provincial and municipal elections. In the municipal elections in 2016, we realized a 67.95%. Municipal government is always, we always have a lower turnout. Now, there's one question that you had said, I think I missed it, but we can come back to that, your last question. Now, Honorable Hussein, the increase in the international engagement relates to the leadership role that we play, especially in SADC ECF. There's a SADC Election Commissions Forum. We are a member of the executive. As a result, there are more trips that we need to undertake, either to Namibia, Gaborone, where the office is located, and so on. Now, the cost for that, they are not as high as traveling, for instance, to Europe or the Americas and so on. So hence, there's that increase in the interaction, but with the cost going down. Now, if we go to Honorable Hussein, the new party funding legislation, yes, we confirm, Honorable Hussein, that the present RPP represented political parties fund does make provision for members of the public and corporates to make contributions fund. But Esther, there's not been 1 cent received into the fund. We've never received a cent into the fund. But I think we must also say to the committee that we've never also advertised the fact that there's a fund to which individuals and corporates can make contributions. Whether we will be successful with the multi-party democracy fund with a bit of marketing, it's a matter on which I do not wish to speculate at this point. It's an empirical question which we don't know at the moment. The ICT upgrade?
And how much has been contributed?
Nothing. No cent has been contributed. Now you asked us to, where did we cut in order to fund the ICT program, the ICT renewal program? We've reduced the number of short courses for staff and not the training for the elections, because then that would have bearing on the quality of the elections. We've also reduced on our radio and TV advertisement costs. We've delayed the replacement of our fleet, motor vehicles. And with the workshops that we have, we are now integrating a program so that we just don't have a workshop for candidate nomination, and then people come, do a workshop in candidate nomination and leave. So you'll do candidate nomination, you'll do party registration, and so on, so that at least people don't have to travel multiple times. And in that manner, we reduced the cost. And in the previous year, we had a rollover of about 9 million. And we've also benefited a bit from the Treasury instruction on the travel and cost containment. For instance, our senior managers no longer travel business, they now travel economy and so on. So there have been savings on that score. And lastly, the procurement of office furniture, we have jettisoned the buying of furniture for our offices, especially our municipal offices. Now, the question about whether the 0% target for no addresses on the voters' roll is realistic. I think it's a difficult question, but the Electoral Commission can be seen to be planning not to meet its legal obligations as well as its judicial injunctions, because the court demands, the order is clear, that if you don't have an address, at least have the description of where the person lives. So, and that's what the plan should be about. Whether we will get there, I think it's an explanation of circumstances that we can proffer to yourselves and to the court. But you have to plan for your obligation, which is at the moment that we need to have the addresses. Is the funding enough? No. No, the funding is not enough to cover all our activities. As we say, the ICT program renewal, it's unfunded. The address acquisition projects, they are only partially funded. So to be direct and clear, the funding that is placed at our disposal is not enough to cover the whole address clearing program, as well as the ICT refresh program. The issues that Honorable Mkalipi has raised, I think the chairperson and members of the committee, the bill is Parliament's bill. It's not the IEC sponsored bill. Parliament has been consulting with us as the people who are intended to be the receiver of the mandate and the custodian of the mandate. So if Parliament changes the different clauses of the bill, sometimes we are not even aware, because the process is driven from Parliament and not from the IEC side. So to the extent that there may be a confusion about Section 10A, perhaps we will have to apologize for that. But the critical issue is that the bill is driven from Parliament, with the state law advisors of Parliament who are drafting on behalf of the ad hoc committee. So that bill is driven from that point of view. It was made clear to all of us when we were in the ad hoc committee on the 14th that the bill was passed by the committee and referred to the National Assembly, but the National Assembly could not look at it until it was referred back to the ad hoc committee. So the ad hoc committee did indicate that they are now resending it back to the National Assembly. And that information is what we were all informed on the 14th. Now, our estimation for the implementation of the bill, members of Parliament, was that it will take us 45 million to set up the unit, this new separate entity, with its CEO, with its own staff, with its own infrastructure, offices, and so on. So that was the estimate, and that's what we took to the ad hoc committee. Treasury was approached for those funds, and they came back and said there is not enough money. So we had to revise our figure. We revised those figures to 30 million and reported accordingly when we were before the portfolio committee that we've revised the figures to 30 million and indicated we can only implement certain things with the 30 million. Then the ad hoc committee came and said, go sit with Treasury again, because Treasury has a view, you have views, and so on, and come together with Treasury before the ad hoc committee. We went and met with Treasury. Treasury said the only money that could be raised was about 20 million. Then we had to then agree with Treasury that if that's the case, we can only implement the bill in an incremental way, in a phased-in approach. So that's where the issue is at. The matter has not been stagnant. We started at 45, and that's what we stand by. If we were to implement that bill in total, we will need 45 million to put up the infrastructure. Mindful of the fact that we had said that we do not want this mandate to cannibalize the resources of electoral preparation. Now, the report on the registration figures, Chair, when we get to the office, we can send that to the Secretariat to distribute to members of the committee. And I agree with the suggestions that were made that from now henceforth, at each of the interactions, we just need, even if it's not the focus of the day, we just need to reflect on the registration and the issue of addresses. I don't think we have a problem with that. The status of Namakwa, Cape Metro, and so on. We have successfully appealed those cases in the Supreme Court of Appeal. They've not been taken to the Constitutional Court, and therefore the orders of the Electoral Court have not been implemented. Those municipalities are functioning normally. Metsimaholo, yes, our PO is noting those developments. He is reporting to us about the developments in Metsimaholo. We note that the area is politically unstable, and that's the consequence of having coalition governments that are not working as well as they should. But I think we must accept as a country that the notion of coalition governments is very new in our country, and we are all trying to make it happen and understand it. It's not an entrenched practice that we have built, over which we've built skills and expertise. Yes, but we are noting developments in Metsimaholo. We know that we may have to rerun those elections potentially. Temporary infrastructure, what happens before a major electoral event is that we do what we call voting stations facilities survey of all voting stations. So we know that there's no electricity, there are no toilets, there's no running water, etc., etc., etc. The difficulty that we have, sometimes it's a trade-off that we have to make between putting a tent or using, especially for registration, a small room for registration purposes. So, and the decision sometimes is better to use a small room than to put up a tent, because with a tent, if the weather is unfavorable, it becomes difficult for people to come. If it's muddy, it's raining, and so on. So those are the practical decisions that we are making on the ground. The reality of the situation is this. The Electoral Commission can only use facilities that are objectively available within our communities. We can only use facilities that are objectively available within the communities. And let's not forget the point that our infrastructure follows our historical imbalance in the provision of infrastructure. That there are places in our country which have excellent world-class infrastructure, and there are places in our country with infrastructure that is less than ideal. So when we go into those communities, that's the infrastructure that is there, and that's the infrastructure that we can use. So it is part of the legacy of South Africa, where there has been uneven development. The issue about the KZN stuff, Honorable Mkalipi, we did file a report about the first incident that you reported with the committee. And we're on record. That report can be refiled again. That matter of payments of staff we dealt with. Now, and subsequently, there have been other developments because the culprit has been formally charged in terms of the disciplinary code, and the disciplinary processes are ensuing. Subsequent to that, you've, earlier this year, you raised a second issue.
Just for purpose of a procedure, which I really agree with the presentation and the responses so far. But Chair, it must be noted that there are two things that deals with accountability. One is that the accounting officer must speak with authority on matters relating to your staff and finances, financials and all of that. I'm not saying, I'm saying just note it, Chair, because in future you're not going to have a situation where the accounting officer does not speak and the chairman of the board is the one that speaks on matters of operations. I thought just note it, Chair, because when you deal with such matters, you want someone that deals with authority. I'm not saying you don't have authority, but you'll know on the accountability lines that your accounting officer is the one that, unless he has decided that he's not going to speak anymore, you're going to answer the question as the chairman of the board and finish. If it's so, then I think, I'm just saying that, I'm not sure as to, unless I'm a little bit confused because I'm trying to balance between the two gentlemen who are seated there. You'll correct me, Chair, if I'm out of order, please, because I don't want to interfere in a bad way. But I thought the two separate things that had to be dealt with.
Yeah, no, I think we've got to manage time now with a
Okay,
very, very
okay, no, that's fine,
tight agenda.
I think the new one, it's important, Chair, but it's not a problem. It's not a problem at all. But
No, it's, I think as soon as they finish, let us just try and manage time and manage the agenda, whether we shall postpone some of the things to next week. Yeah. Yes. Let's just try and manage time, given the agenda. There are some issues that we cannot escape without today as well. That is the problem. That is where I have a problem as a chairperson. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity purposes, Mr. Mamabulo is the accounting officer as the CEO. I am the executive authority as the chair. Thanks.
I really will try to work. I really have an appreciation for us to finish. Ma?
Let us just try and manage time.
Okay, and then make the ICT will the ICT not delay the elections? Our plan
Order,
is
Chair.
that it should not.
Order.
Yes, sir.
He didn't finish to respond to my questions, but I'm very happy if he can respond in writing to my question, because he didn't finish. So he's being put under pressure now to just not to continue responding to my question. But yeah, I'm very happy to get a written response to those things. Thank you.
Thank you for the cooperation, sis.
Thanks, Chair, and we know that we'll do accordingly. The ICT refresh will not delay the elections because we have not only the legal prescripts that determine the time frames for the elections, and it's also a constitutional imperative. Elections must be held within 90 days of the expiry of the term. So our timelines are such that we will conclude the IT refresh ahead of the elections in 2019. So it won't delay the elections, and the reason it can't delay the elections is because we have to observe the constitutional timeframes. We don't have an option there. And then what is involved in the phases? I think we did indicate that there are two components to the IT refresh. The first one is the hardware replacement, which is the servers, 122 of them, the personal computers, printers, and printers and laptops. That's the first component. The second component of the IT refresh relates to the migration from Windows 7 to Windows 10. And then your Microsoft Office suite, the new one that is being used. Then the question that comes addresses the informal settlements. It is true that the biggest problem with addresses is in informal settlements as well as in certain rural areas. What is the future plan? The future plan is as follows. The new voter registration device that we are getting will work on the basis of the collection of descriptors and taking the GPS coordinates of a person where the person lives. So on that new VRD, when we register you, we'll take the description of where you live as well as a point with geolocational coordinates, which in our view will be sufficient for purposes of sufficient particularities. The turnout from the registration, we will file the statistical report with the Secretariat, but as matters stand, we registered 2.7 million people over the 2 days. And 490,000 of those were new registrations. Over 80% of that 490,000 were persons under the age of 29, being the youth. Yeah, but let me leave it that for now, but we will file a detailed report with the Secretariat. How many parties are registered? Over 500 parties are registered. Most of them, though, 300 out of them are registered at a municipal level. In other words, they are registered to participate only in municipal elections. But registration is an ongoing process. Every day we register new parties, so the number will grow on a monthly basis. The experience is that when you move closer to election, the rate of registration goes up. More parties register. Then, Member Raputi, the number of, you are correct in saying that we cannot only rely on TV and radio. And in the strat plan that we submitted, we are planning in the year under discussion 45,000 electoral democracy workshops. We refer to them as events, 45,000 of them. And in these workshops, we're looking at an interaction with a minimum of 20 people. So, because we can't lose that face-to-face interaction with the voters. The Statistics South Africa estimate that 34.9 million South Africans are of voting age. In other words, they are 18 years and above, 34.9. That's their estimate of South Africans who are eligible voters. We're calling it voting age population. Now, if you compare our voters' roll with the voting age population, we are at 75%. We are at 75% people who are registered. Our target for the elections, we want to grow that by a further 1.6 million before the elections. That will get us closer to the 80% range. the VRD, voter registration device, that procurement is underway. I think one honorable member indicated that they need timelines. The issue there is a question of affordability, and that discussion around affordability will happen in the month of April, where we will take decisions regarding whether we are proceeding with a new VRD or not. Now, the questions that were raised by Honorable Chauke, we've submitted the detailed strategic plan document, the APP, the detailed APP. We've also submitted the technical indicator description that says we're going to achieve this by this date and this is what it means. So all those are on the record. And then the issue that you raise about the voters' roll as being a standard item during our interaction with the committee, we will arrange accordingly. And then the funding for the IT refresh, Honorable Kumete, it's an unresolved issue. We are doing something about it. We're not just sitting on our laurels and saying Treasury has not funded. We are looking at making savings internally in our programs so that this happens. And we are committed for that. If we are unable to achieve this, we will report to the committee and say it can be possible. And we will write and indicate that. And then the detailed election, I agree that before the end of June, we'll have to come and give the elections readiness presentation to the committee. 23,000 voting stations and farm voting stations. I think, Honorable Fickland, it's a very important issue because people have to respond to the call of nature and we need to make facilities available for that. Normally, where the farm owner says, no, you can't use my pollution facilities, we will then provide temporary mobile toilets and so on. But then we would have to have that understanding when we do the infrastructure assessment. Restaurants, this is a difficult issue, and I think we will request political parties to assist us because the President and the Minister of Home Affairs normally declare election days public holidays. But in our country, the employers keep people at work despite the fact that it's a public holiday. We will consider the matter as the Commission and see if there are any interventions beyond securing a holiday that must be made with industry to ensure that people are given a chance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. We are at a very, very, very critical time now. We've still got to go to government printing works, and then the emails in relation to the early naturalization of Gupta. And now we've got to manage. It may seem now that we are running away from some of the other issues. Yes, Kekan.
Thank you, Chair. Kulube, ke a leboga o kgonne gore fa di answera ka mogore di nyaka. Mara swa fetša. You are not done. I've got remedial actions in front of me. I've got the judgment in front of me. What you told the committee is economical truth. It's not the way it is. And please, I want to suggest that the judge who was in the bench that day is Judge D.S. Fourie. And the main reason why he dismissed this case, it was because of you have not pleaded, you have not given the facts as a commission why you wanted this contract to be reviewed. But today, because of I respect what the chairperson has said, I must be led. I will humbly request the chairperson that after recess, we must have a date with you to come and discuss this issue. There's no truth that you told us. You tried to soften us. The truth is here, and here is the remedial actions, and you have never went to the facts of the real issue. You know, in part of some remedial actions, you were told that in consultation with the Treasury, you must make sure, consider reviewing the entire lease agreement. And I've never heard anything about it. And it's the one that is very important than all of those you reported. So, Chair, in due respect, I request that after the 10th, when we come back, there must be a date, Secretary, with this. Because here, it shows very clear that there's a corruption, scheming, and protecting each other. It's clear. The contract is 320 million. And we cannot see this money just being floated like this thing. This deal, it is clear according to the public protector that it was concluded in the bid. Ne? He put it in her report that I'm not responding. Okay.
No. He is following up on the
So,
CO.
yeah, it's a follow-up. Then, Chair, I don't want to go in on this thing.
Order,
I
Chair.
wanted to say that let us
Chair,
have...
order. I just want your indulgence. Are we doing follow-ups after they have responded?
Yeah,
Chair.
yeah.
No, in fact, my issue was around the fact that given this agenda that I have to manage, what do we do together to manage this meeting now effectively? There are outstanding issues, but I do not think that we can address them now. Let us plan now as to how we can address the matter, to the satisfaction of everyone.
Yes.
Because if we try to address this now, it will soon be 2 o'clock, and then we are still having the issue of this naturalization as well.
Thank you, Chair. That's why I'm saying that I'm suggesting that after the 10th of April, we must have a date with them only to talk about this matter. Our new Dawn directed us that we must fight corruption everywhere we see it. So the time of Miles playing over the table is over. We must make sure that where we suspect corruption, we must deal with it. Here, each and everyone, even if you have not done law, you will understand exactly what is happening. But my proposal is that one, Chair, you will work with the Secretary to have a date after April, not after May, after 10th of April, before May. We must meet them and talk to this issue. It was concluded over the bid. Thank you.
No, Chair, mine is just a brief one. With the new presentation, with the presentation that we have made, does it therefore impact on your annual performance plan, the changes that you have made, and how are you going to amend your annual performance plan? I'll give you one example. You set up a target for a training. You said we have now reduced the training. We have now cut the motor vehicle. How are you going? Because the annual performance plan becomes a contract between yourself and Parliament. So if there's going to be any changes that we are going to make, it's important that you should either recall or make the amendment into your annual performance plan that are agreed upon between yourself and the committee. Secondly, the issue of the ICT and the budget, I hear that there's a problem there, it's not funded, and we have tried to talk to Treasurer around that. You may want to give the committee some kind of a detail to look at how best the committee can assist you, because we don't want any impediment with regards to preparations for elections, and ICT becomes quite very critical. In the presentation that we'll deal with, Chair, in the next round, when we receive the elections plan, you may want to present that particular information so that we can then marry it together. Thank you.
Okay, let us respond and make concluding remarks. Okay.
Chair, I just wanted to find out the shortfall that you've confirmed with regards to the funding for voter registration. What is that estimate amount? Is it 20 million or 40 million or so? I apologize if it's an unfair question to catch you off guard, but I just want to get a figure. Thank you.
If we exclude the Verdi, Chair, our shortfall is in the region of 230 million. And then, Chair, the proposals by Honorable Chauke around proposals as to how the committee could assist us, and I think are welcome. And the APP currently takes into account the adjustments that we've reported. Chair, on the issue of Riverside Office Park, I don't have an objection, and we can't have an objection anyway, that we can come back and discuss it. But Chair, I did not mislead the portfolio committee. The list, one of the remedial actions is that it must be reviewed. A review happened in the North Gauteng High Court, and the reason the case was dismissed, in my view, the main reason was that the papers did not meet the standard for review in terms of the promotion of Administrative Justice Act.
Okay, no, let us then agree that perhaps we adjourn some of these matters, and then further planning will happen, and then we'll see how to allocate some of these things. Because surely time is not going to be enough. Yes, Mkhali?
Chair, because this is Parliament and we must be on records when we get some of the responses, I do mind the fact that we don't have time to engage. Maybe after the IEC and the GPW, members of committee must sit alone and replan how to engage with them, because it's always the fact that after they've made their presentation, there's no time to engage with them. I think it's our problem as a committee. We must reschedule how to engage with them. But again, nevertheless, Chair, because other members, we have allowed them to make their follow-ups, I was going to keep quiet. Let me just explore that opportunity as well. In your response regarding the confusion around Section 10 of the political funding, I don't take your response as a very valid one, because I raised that matter here. And according to my understanding, we as a portfolio committee of Home Affairs, we also have to have some answers regarding the political funding. I was with you there in ad hoc committee, and then they've even said themselves that you also have to come to this portfolio committee because that's where you report. And above that, when I engage you to say I have these two sections, the one sections, we got it from you through our Secretary General who sits with you there. The other section, we get it here from Parliament. Which one is the correct version? You said, both of you gentlemen sitting right there, this is the correct version, it's on records. Now coming here to say it's a parliamentary process, it confuses us more. So Chair, good Chair, with a good office, I will suggest you to tell us how to verify this information, because this is a new information at all. So can we take this thing to the Speaker as a head of the institution to say, which one is the correct one now? We have two sections in front of us, ad hoc committee and Home Affairs. And now, SABC IEC said, no. In fact, it's not their baby. So I'll need an advice from you, because this is a serious matter. And this matter is coming today in the House.
Chair, may I request that for the authoritatively correct version of the bill, we approach the ad hoc committee to give us what is the current status of the bill? Because as I say, is their bill, we have what they sent us. And I think as the committee, let's request the ad hoc committee on party funding to make available the most recent version of the bill.
No, I think on that note, perhaps we've got to move to government printing works, and then from government printing works, then we'll have early naturalization. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Oh, 2 minutes break, then we'll come back.